Ecclesiastes 9, the first three words in verse 1, for all this, indicate a reference to the preceding verses before we go any further. Notice back in chapter 8, verse 14 again. There is a vanity which is done upon the earth, that there be just men unto whom it happeneth according to the work of the wicked. Again, there be wicked men to whom it happeneth according to the work of the righteous. I said that this is also is vanity. And 8 verse 17. Then I beheld all the work of God, that a man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun, because though a man labor to seek it out, yet he shall not find it. Yea, further, though a wise man think to know it, yet shall he not be able to find it. And then again, verse 1, for all this I considered in my heart, even to declare all this, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God. No man knoweth either love or hatred but all that is before them. Every philosophy of man, every what they call an ethical system, every system of practice or worship, every sense of duty and reverence that tries to explain why bad things happen to good people or good things happen to bad people, and how a man can find real, permanent, lasting peace or hope without the involvement of a wise and an intelligent creator is going to fall flat eventually. The righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God, verse 1 says. This is what's missing in atheism and agnosticism and Buddhism and humanism. The idea that there's an intelligent God and an intelligent, wise creator. You look around the world and more honest, objective researchers and scientists are seeing more indication, more evidence for an intelligence in the creation. Brother Everett and I were talking about this, maybe a year ago, about high-powered microscopes looking at the cells, human cells, below the DNA, and they look like tiny little machines that have been invented and programmed to do what they do. They look like something that's mechanical operating, and it's all been programmed there. And the idea that there's an intelligent creator behind it all, and that there might be some grander scheme and plan behind all of it, that's what's missing in all the ethical, philosophical systems of man that tries to find the answers to life or the secret to joy and happiness without the idea or the suggestion of a God to whom he's going to have to give an account one day. We can do it on our own. When you think about it, it makes no sense whatsoever. All of the physical objects, if there is no God, there is no intelligence behind what we see, then everything, every physical object, every element and component in the universe, the creation as we see it, is really just operating by some sort of random chance. There's no purpose behind what we see. I'm looking out and I see all of the chairs neatly arranged. That's because intelligence, the minds of our church members have sought to organize them that way. But if there's no intelligence guiding and directing and responsible for what we see, then the idea that, for example, in the Buddhistic idea, that through good words and good thoughts and good intentions, you can somehow generate good results outside of you, and good things will come back to you. But why should that work? Why should that work at all if everything is pointless and given over to effectively random chance? If there's no intelligence behind anything, then you, by some sort of deliberate, intelligent action, can't affect anything. And the idea that you're an atheist or an agnostic, and this life is all there is, there's really no purpose to this life in the big picture, that leaves men and their men's souls rather empty as well. Man's attempt to figure out life and eternity on his own with no allegiance to one bigger and better and wiser than himself, that's a corrupt instinct from the fallen nature of man. We're told that the riches of Christ are unsearchable, that I should preach among the Gentiles the unsearchable riches of Christ, Ephesians 3:8. We're told that the peace of God passeth all understanding, Philippians 4:7. We're told that the ways of God are past finding out, Romans 11:33, and the mind of God is unknowable, Romans 11:34. Oh, the depth of the riches both of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are his judgments and his ways, past finding out. For who hath known the mind of the Lord, or who hath been his counselor? Because you cannot know everything about God. You cannot, it does not mean you should give up trying, or trying to learn more, or learn him, know him. If you could understand everything about God, if you could somehow understand everything about God, then someone has said, by definition, he wouldn't be God. Because you expect a being we call God to be beyond you. The idea that you, in your mind, could understand and know everything he does, how he does it, why he does it, what would prevent you from then setting about to do it? If you could understand everything about God, then by definition he wouldn't be God. Because God has to be something larger than any mortal man can fully comprehend and grab a hold of. Solomon was ahead of his time in the world of 1000 BC. Verse 1 says, no man knoweth either love or hatred. And this can be taken more than one way by the words, by all that is before them. Those words, by all that is before, that either past history before the man shows up or the future events that lay before someone or in front of them. And a man cannot determine whether certain acts are acts of love or acts of hatred when they're happening to him. Look at verse 2. All things come alike to all. There is one event to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good and to the clean, and to the unclean, to him that sacrificeth and to him that sacrificeth not. As is the good, so is the sinner, and he that sweareth, as he that feareth an oath. In the Old Testament, this would have been easier to discern than in the New Testament, because under the Old Testament, riches and health were the results of righteous living. Proverbs 3, verses 1 and 2. My son, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandments, for length of days and long life and peace shall they add to thee. Proverbs 4:10. Hear, O my son, and receive my sayings, and the years of thy life shall be many. Likewise, poverty and sickness were the payoffs for wicked living in the past. Proverbs 10:27. The fear of the Lord prolongeth days, but the years of the wicked shall be shortened. You recall they asked the Lord Jesus, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he should be born blind? John 9, verse 2. In the New Testament, however, we must walk by faith. We walk by faith. And so what seemed to us at times to be tokens of God's wrath and judgment upon us for one reason or another. In fact, we're asked in Romans 8, verse 35, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? And Paul lists a number of hardships, shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword. Those things turn out to be tokens of God's love toward us upon closer examination. Whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. Hebrews 12:6. And so no man can fully discern everything about God, the mind of God, the actions of God, the purposes of God. And you and I walk by faith. And in the New Testament, blessings or trials come to us not in direct proportion to our degree of obedience in Christian living or disobedience in sinful living. That was how things were judged in the Old Testament. But in the New Testament, not so. Not necessarily so. And verse 2, once again, all things come alike to all. There is one event to the righteous and to the wicked. That one event will be death, the day your body finally quits. And note later on in that verse, as is the good, so is the sinner. He uses the word sinner much as the word unrighteous, or the wicked, or the fool, or the unclean are used throughout the Old Testament, in that sense of the word. If someone was known for their wickedness, known for their uncleanness, known for their dishonesty, known for their foolish actions, and that was the reputation they had established for themselves, then they're categorized with the wicked, with the foolish. But if someone was known for trying to please God, trying to be a good father, trying to obey what he was revealed to him by God or through the law and the prophets, that person was categorized with the righteous and with the just. And it's in that sense that some are said to be good and some are said to be sinners. In the New Testament, God adds to all of that and says, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. But the idea, verse 2 could be the ultimate verse for pessimism if you ignore the rest of the book. That says, all things come alike to all. There is one event to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good and to the clean. The idea of pessimism being, why bother trying? If everything's going to end up the same way, why worry if you're doing what you want to do or worry to live a clean life? That's a foolhardy way to look. If you look back at chapter 8, verse 14, there is a vanity which is done upon the earth, that there be just men, unto whom it happeneth according to the work of the wicked. Again, there be wicked men, to whom it happeneth according to the work of the righteous. I said that this also is vanity. The context of verse 2 is limited to this theme, that bad things happen to good people, who we think of as good people, and sometimes good things happen to those who we know are bad people, shouldn't get them. One of the political presidential candidates was talking, I think the other day, about the fact that some guy they've arrested for suspected terrorism back east, set off several bombs, is going to get the best hospital care, he's going to be treated by the best doctors, and so forth, get the best food, etc. And it is a very disheartening thing to live in a government that's not perfect and under a political system that's not perfect. It's preferable to all the others in the world, but as long as he's a citizen and he's got due process and they're going to investigate, make sure they've got the right suspect and so forth, you can't just strip the basic guarantees away from someone that the rest of us don't like. Because you wouldn't want them taken away from you if you were arrested for something and it turns out you were innocent. But that's one of the frustrating things about this world. It's one of the frustrating things about the politics of this world and this life and the efforts of man to create a better world and a perfect world. You can't do it. You can't do it. Just when he thinks he's remedied one problem, there's some other problem that arises. Verse 3, this is an evil among all things that are done under the sun, that there is one event unto all. Yea, also the heart of the sons of men is full of evil, and madness is in their heart while they live. And after that, They go to the dead. The word this is an evil. That will refer forward to the middle of the verse, the heart and the badness. Christ and Paul both confirm this view of man, that there's madness. Madness is in their heart while they live. Go, if you will, to Matthew 7 and Romans 3. Matthew 7 and also Romans 3. Start there at Romans 3, begin there at verse 10. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none that understandeth, there is none that seeketh after God. They are all gone out of the way, they are together become unprofitable. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. Now look back at Matthew 7 and verse 11. Here's what Jesus said to his disciples. If ye then, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask him? And they confirmed a certain truth that men, unclean men, unregenerated men, are wicked. They're evil. They're corrupt. Alongside the eternal holiness of God, alongside him, everything is corrupt. Everything is contaminated. Now, by the Lord Jesus' words there, it's clear that neither one of them mean to say that men are incapable of doing good. Jesus said, if ye then, being evil, know how to give good gifts. And so it doesn't mean men are not able to do good, but it's clear that they don't always do good. And if God's standard is absolute perfection and righteousness in every detail, the entrance of even one sin ruins all that. It's no longer perfect and flawless and without sin and without reproach in every regard. Sin is madness. Sin is insanity. And you and I live in a world. I was thinking about this today. I was sort of daydreaming at my job. I got to thinking why this generation, younger people, and even their parents for that matter, but increasing numbers of younger people, the more time goes on, the more come into the world. They're unreceptive to the gospel of the grace of God and the simplicity of the gospel and how simple forgiveness of their sins and the regenerating of their dead spirit and the cleansing of their soul. They're unreceptive to that. If they had first started trying to be deeply religious and deeply committed to some code of conduct and were frustrated every time they tried and failed, then the gospel that God would forgive them, God would receive them without any works on their part, but if they would trust in what Jesus did, that would be welcome news. At least it ought to be. But the problem is the modern generation hasn't even tried living up to some great moral code so that the freedom of grace and salvation would seem like a fresh breath of fresh air and welcome news to them. But this doesn't impress them, the salvation of their soul, the forgiveness of their sins, because they've never even tried living up to any standards. This is how lax and the low expectations. You ever watch people shopping at the grocery store in their pajamas? I mean, they don't even have standards when it comes to how they look when they go outside the house in public. The idea that they have been trying to be diligent and religious and live up to a certain code of conduct and moral behavior and purity and goodness. They haven't been trying to do that. If they had been trying to do that for some time, then the fact that God would forgive them by grace through faith would be very welcome news to them. But I'm convinced that so many people reject the gospel and the simplicity that God wants to save them and forgive them because they haven't yet understood that they're sinners. They haven't tried to live up to anything and then realize I can't do it. There must be something wrong with me. They haven't been convinced that they're sinners yet. But they are. They are. Think of someone that goes to modern college and university and has been raised on CBS and NBC and ABC and CNN and cable news networks and national public radio and public broadcasting and all the other filth of Hollywood and the movies. Now that they've been educated, especially journalists today, they think that the biggest virtue that they can possess is to tolerate sin and tolerate wickedness, any kind of moral corruption. The more you tolerate it, the more virtuous you are. No, it just indicates how corrupt you have become. And but that's madness. The idea that a man could be a great Olympic athlete, a decathlon winner, and 30 years later want to call himself a woman and dress up in women's clothing and have everybody change, call him Caitlin instead of Bruce. Bruce was bad enough, if you ask me. But then call him Caitlin, and then walk around he still looks like a very masculine man with a dress on. And he doesn't have a gender identity problem. He has either a psychiatric problem and a problem in the heart. It's sin that's never been resolved somewhere, somehow. And that this is the new normal. We're supposed to appreciate his boldness and his courage to act like a weirdo. I'm sorry, that doesn't impress me. Someone who could fight the temptations of wickedness and corruption and evil and come out victorious on the other side, that would impress me. But someone that gives in to their weird, deviant fantasies is pretty sickening. Let's read verse 4. But sin, it brings insanity, it brings madness these days. Verse 4, for to him that is joined to all the living there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. The living dog and the dead lion principle, well known. Some small facilities that are used are better than large ones that are sitting there idle. Present opportunities, though small, are still better than large and great opportunities in the past that no longer exist. Some small talent, if used correctly, will accomplish more than a great talent if used carelessly. And if you're still living, you still have some chance to please God with your life in some way. I recall chapter 7, verse 1, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. Well, the reason for that statement is in the fact that the dead are no longer conscious to the world, and therefore they're free from sin. They're free from pain and free from suffering. And the general principle remains that something small that's still alive is better than something that was great but is now dead. There's an ethical dilemma that comes up with that. A living Michael Jackson was certainly not better than a dead General MacArthur. A living Madonna was certainly not better than a dead Fanny Crosby. So, but the general principle though is there that if something's still alive, there's still a chance that it can be redeemed and do something for God rather than the one that's already gone. What time is it getting on? Well, let's look at one more verse. Actually, two more verses, and I think we may come back to this next week. We'll pick up next week here at verses 5 and 6. But it says, "For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything, neither have they any more a reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Also their love and their hatred and their envy is now perished, neither have they any more a portion forever in anything that is done under the sun." Verse 5 particularly is a primary Jehovah's Witness verse, used to teach soul sleep. And likewise verse 6, "Their love, their hatred, their envy is now perished." The idea that the soul goes unconscious upon death and just lies there dormant, unresponsive in the grave, in the casket, under the ground. And these groups teach, and not only Jehovah's Witnesses, but Seventh-day Adventists teach this idea that the soul doesn't go to heaven or to hell. It goes to sleep and lays there for some indeterminate amount of time. And another group called the Christadelphians, they also believe that. And I'm not sure, but I think old Herbert Armstrong once taught this when his organization was around. But there's some obvious flaws in it. They say that the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything. That's the idea that you're dead, but your consciousness has been shut off. You don't have any awareness of anything around you. It has nothing to do with the dead having a consciousness, but it's just been turned off. But the physical body is unresponsive. And those things that are done with the physical body, verse 6, their love, hatred, envy, all those things have now perished. It has nothing to do with the mind of the person, the consciousness of the person, now just falling asleep. Look at verse 5. It says, "Neither have they, the dead, neither have they any more a reward." Every Jehovah's Witness you know, and I wrote a tract about this very subject called Soul Sleep. But and I think I said in the end of that tract, every Jehovah's Witness, whoever interrupted you while you were in the shower, thinks that when you die, you go to sleep and you lay there in the grave. And you are there until some future awakening when God calls you forth. But they've taken when someone dies, their body lays there motionless, their eyes are either closed or they have them, or someone closes them. And they give the appearance of sleep. Seventh-day Adventists and the JWs have taken all the references to sleep in the Bible and say, well, the consciousness of that person, the soul, is sleeping. And they take it to mean sleep. But it's a metaphor. In John 11, when Jesus said he was going to raise Lazarus from sleep, the disciples thought he was taking a nap. Well, Lord, if he sleeps, he's going to do well. And then, I think around John 11, about verse 8, along in there, Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. Sleep is simply a metaphor. The word sleep is simply a metaphor for the death of the body. In the funeral business, and I can say this with some experience now, the intention is to make the person look as they once did at a healthier time in life, when they were just asleep. That's why their head is laid on a pillow. And it gives the appearance of them being comfortable for rest. And the idea that, I guess one of the best compliments someone can offer is to say that he looks like he's just sleeping. And I guess that's what the objective is. But sleep is a metaphor. Your eyes are closed, you're not moving, you're not doing anything. And but for the Christian, it's a great metaphor, because when you sleep, it's with the idea that you're going to wake up again. We're looking forward to that one day. And the dead in Christ are going to rise. But these groups, they take the condition, they take the status or the condition of the description of the body, and they try to apply it to the condition of the soul. And say the soul is what's sleeping. And notice how their own verse comes back to bite them. Verse 5. But the dead know not anything, neither have they any more a reward. Every Jehovah's Witness expects to receive some reward one day. They expect to be rewarded for being true to the divine name and so forth. But if they're right about the rest of the verse, the memory of them is forgotten. They're not coming up, they're not receiving a reward or anything. They're taking the description of the description of the body as though it were sleeping, and they've applied it to the condition of the soul and said that the soul is what's sleeping. Not so. And it should be self-evident when you read these verses. We'll come back to these verses again next time.